Having a little bit of technical problems today again. It's a little frustrating, but that's okay. But this last part will not be as long, but it is extremely important to hear the rest of Barbie's story. We ended with her and her husband starting to work on their marriage. And I had just started telling the story of her son, Lance. Then in July of 1984, Barbara took another unexpected step on that dark, winding staircase. 13-year-old Lance brought so much joy to his mother. He was working on becoming an Eagle Scout, loving Christ, filling his sketchbook with drawings, and hoping to study architecture. One day, he rode his bike to the pool at the high school to practice swimming and water polo with the team for which he and his brother played. While fooling around on the deck after practice, Lance threw one of his brother's socks up on the roof of the dressing room. Joking and teasing, he scrambled up the chain link fence to retrieve the sock. As Lance searched for the sock, he suddenly fell through a rotten piece of plywood that was covering a broken skylight. When Barbie drove up to the school, she was greeted by sirens and blinking lights. Lance had fallen on his head. He was rushed to the hospital and put on a respirator. For 8 days, he remained in a coma. Barbie stood by her son's bed, unable to sleep or eat for days. Life was a nightmare. She prayed and pleaded. She begged God to spare her son. The doctor performed brain surgery, but after the 8th day, the CAT scan showed a flat line. Lance was brain dead. After the funeral, Barbie slowly sank into depression. Between the summer of 1984 and early 1986, life was a dark and turbulent narrow staircase that spiraled ever downward. She was alone in her weeping and in her many visits to her son's grave. In the spring of 1986, unable to accept his wife's need to work through Lance's death, Barbara's husband chose to leave. In her mind, Barbie went back to those same questions. Why would God allow so much suffering? Where were God's justice and mercy? Her husband and her son were gone forever. Barbie's oldest child, Kimberly, graduated from the same high school Lance would have attended, and in 1985, she entered Biola University. Then she, too, began a downward spiral. My rose-colored glasses were shattered, she wrote as she explained her disillusionment over her brother's death and her parents' separation. She medicated her pain with legal and illegal drugs and alcohol. She became high risk, moving in and out of hospitals and emergency rooms. On May 7, 1988, Barbie's birthday, Kimberly came to see her mother. Kim was quiet that night. Finally, she said, "Mom, I'm going into the hospital again tomorrow, and I'm scared." "I'll be there for you," Barbie promised. "I love you, Kim." The next day, Kimberly came by with a Mother's Day card for Barbie, but she left without her mom seeing her, and she never went to the hospital. 2 days later, on May 9th, a police car drove up. Kim had crashed her car and was dead at the age of 21. Barbie, who had been in the kitchen making lunches for her other children, stared out the kitchen window in numb grief. Her son, Troy, walked out of the house. Her daughter, Koi, looked up and said, "Am I next?" The pain seemed impossible to endure. It was piercing at times, dull and numb at others. Everything was darkness. Questions piled upon questions. More pain, more perplexity, nagging doubts, a desperate need to make sense of senseless tragedy. That year was a dark night of the soul. Some months later, Koi went to live with her father and his new wife. Troy and Barbie and a niece who came to live with them now faced life together in a large, empty house that had once held an active, growing family of 6. Over the next few years, Barbie did not rush into a search for answers. The questions were too overwhelming. How or to what extent had God caused or allowed her divorce and the death of 2 children? Not only that, but how about the suffering of all the people she'd seen in India and in East Germany? Why does God allow such suffering? Yet deep in her mind, Barbie knew that this was not really the point. No, the point was that God himself was the answer to all questions. Barbie needed him now more than ever, and she knew it. She mused on those early idealistic days of first coming to Christ. What a longing she'd had to see his world, how she'd wanted to understand the Lord, to appreciate his passion for the lost. A gentle smile crossed her face when she thought again of her favorite verse, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. He seemed to be whispering, come higher, Barbie, come higher. I am your servant, God. I will go and do whatever you ask, Barbie said aloud and through her tears. In 1986, Barbie, along with her sisters and their families, moved to Colorado. Now, tucked in the foot of the base of the Rockies, Barbie Kohler could now look out her window and see Pikes Peak. Many mornings she gazes at the mountain's strong presence and recites with confidence Psalm 121, verses 1 through 2. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Barbie is involved with missions, Campus Crusade, Joni and Friends, Josh McDowell's Outreach. She travels and prays, gives and supports. She volunteers at Outreach of Hope, a cancer encouragement ministry. She visits those who are dying, listens to their questions, and gives them permission to express their doubts. She empathizes, identifies, sympathizes, and travails on their behalf. She has won the right to be heard by those who are hurting. And what about all those questions, especially your own? Barbie would say, the Christian life is not neat and tidy. It's not orderly and predictable as we would like it to be. Nor is it always a life of romance and adventure. The problem of suffering is not about something that can be easily answered. It is about someone. And so it stands to reason that the answer must be someone and not something. He is the answer. Suffering keeps crushing our hopes that earth can never satisfy, that it can never keep its promises. I've learned not to get too comfortable in a world destined for destruction. I remember the time I felt so at home in the land of the Bible. But one day I'll be in the real promised land, home at last with my Lord and with all my children. My name, Barbara, means stranger, and I am a stranger here, a pilgrim on my way to the place my Savior is preparing for me. I wanted to know Jesus before, back when I was young. He answered my heart's desire, but I didn't have to travel all over the world to find him. He's here, even in my pain. I know him in the fellowship of sharing his sufferings. I would never have chosen the path my life has taken. Then again, no one necessarily likes taking up his cross daily. But loss forces me to do that every day, and in doing so, I feel his touch on my wounds, and that is enough. At first, Barbie was uneasy when I asked if I could write about her in this book. She didn't think her faith was extraordinary enough. After all, she still wrestles with doubts and discouragement, but I think that's exactly what makes her testimony so striking. Oh, would that more of us had the faith to doubt and yet believe. Now that would be extraordinary. And I like Barbie's story because I think all of us have walked similar paths. We've all had times of doubt and we've all had times of discouragement. And yet we can doubt and still believe. Hope to see you next week. God bless you. Bye.